Without further ado, it's Howdy Partner Live with Mo. Take it away, Mo, please.
Thank you, Ghost Host. I always look up when you introduce me, by the way, and I realize you're like virtual.
We should all look upwards, be like, blessed are we by AM.
Ghost Host, right? No. Welcome, everyone, to Howdy Partner. I'm naming this Howdy Partner 2 because it's a little different. But before we get into that, I wanted to introduce everyone. First, you all know me, Mo El Hassan, Partner Solutions Architect here at AWS. Along with me, we have Stuti. Stuti, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, this is Stuti Deshpande, and I'm a Partner Solution Architect at AWS. And today I'll be co-hosting the show with Mo.
Oh yeah, and last but not least, we have the serverless mom herself, Nika Fee. Nika, do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'm Nika to my friends, and Nika, if you find Nika hard to say. I'm a dev advocate over at New Relic. I specialize mainly in serverless. I also do some like Kubernetes stuff and some other just cloud architecture stuff in general. And I'm speaking at AWS. You can see a couple different talks by me this week and going into next week.
Oh, yeah, right. Obviously, this is a different episode. I wanted to obviously talk about what Howdy Partner is. If you've watched this show before, you know that this is a 2-hour-long-ish show, typically. But it's a little different this time. We have Nika here, and we really just wanted to talk to Nika about her reInvent experience so far, what's going on with New Relic and AWS at this reInvent, and maybe some stuff that she's excited about. So,
thank you so much.
First of all, Nika, how has reInvent been?
reInvent, it's been a weird one, I won't lie. It's actually a funny thing. Even though I worked a ton with AWS stuff, I actually did personal stuff kept me from reInvent last year. And so then this is actually my first reInvent. Like the year before that, I was like writing stuff and helping out with booth planning, but I didn't go. And then last year I could go, and now. And so, but I have a good sense, what it's like, this is a big change, right? The all online version is a big one. The theme that I think a lot of us have been talking about that we are all struggling with, I think every conference is struggling with that is longer than a single day, is that work doesn't stop. And so, we're trying to connect with people and we're trying to have that asynchronous availability, but it just is real that, you still have to deliver your story points. You still have to write your emails and respond to your Slack stuff. And yeah, that can take it out of a person to do that and then be trying to absorb, cool talks and other information.
Yeah, this time of year, I'm usually in Vegas, and I actually miss Vegas this year. But, getting 7 miles in per day, walking around the different venues, like meeting people in person. This is a little different, but nonetheless, tons and tons of content going on.
I think the big thing for me has been, I'm sorry if I'm talking over you, but for me, the big theme has been, if reInvent in another year or another big conference was a chance to make new connections, this year it is about strengthening those connections that we had and really seeing like, here are these people that you worked with before. They're so brilliant. You finally get to see their talks. You get to amplify their voices, and you feel like, wow, this is, like I have such an amazing network. And, we all owe some conscious work to let in newcomers. And I think that's work that still needs to be done. But yeah, that's been the theme, is like, we're realizing how valuable those connections are.
Right. No, you talk about bringing in newcomers, and it makes me think about the serverless community in particular, which I'm super happy to be involved with myself. And yeah, getting to meet, I was able to meet a bunch of like serverless techfluencers recently after one of the reInvent days, which was pretty cool. But yeah, certainly different. But I wanted to talk about New Relic. Yesterday, we had a chance to play a little bit with New Relic in an AWS game day. And if you haven't played AWS game day before, you totally should. But I got to spend some time with Ghost Host and Nikki Stone, and we got to do some challenges using New Relic, getting to use the query language. And it was a pretty cool experience. But I wanted to know what else was going on with New Relic and AWS.
Yeah, so it's an interesting one. I even had people from within, New Relic's a big organization, and I had people come to me and say, we're at reInvent. What's the connection? What's the connection? And that was an interesting one because, it sort of reminded me of those questions you get at a meetup where somebody comes in, maybe they're an enterprise software person, they haven't worked with AWS, and they ask these questions like, well, what do you do when AWS changes the API? Or what do you do when AWS deprecates that product? And it's like, well, it's like, hey, this is kind of a different world than I think maybe you're used to, right? And one of them is, I think the big misunderstanding that people are like, hey, why would you use this observability tool, New Relic, this metrics and monitoring tool on AWS? And the answer is basically, if you've gotten even your baby AWS cert, you'll know that there's this thing of separations of concerns, right? There's shared responsibility for components. And the fact is, the way I put it is like, hey, if you didn't structure your for loop correctly and you're grabbing way too much memory, if you're concatenating a bunch of strings in Node and using way too much memory, AWS is not going to email you about that. Right? If your packages need updating on your virtual machine, AWS is not going to email you about that. And not only do they tell you this, they test you on it to tell you that you're good at AWS, right? It's a key thing. And so, AWS gives you the box, right? And you run your code in the box. And what New Relic is really about is about giving you insight into the code that you wrote and constructed. So that means that there's a pretty good connection there at a basic level. Is the question of what of my own code that I wrote, and obviously my team wrote, what is performing well, what is performing slowly, and how is it performing in aggregate, and then also zooming in and seeing exactly, which method calls, which, when it gets called, with what parameters does it take the longest, and those sorts of questions. That's what New Relic is all about. And so, so that's the connection, is that people still need that insight. We're all, gonna still need that insight. And at New Relic, we've written some pretty great tools to continue to do that. Well, even when you move on to the cloud, and especially this has come up with serverless in the last few years. That, serverless erases so many of the traditional problems that you have if you're just, buying bare metal hardware and storing it in the closet, or even, you move on to a great virtual machine. Serverless wipes away so many of your existing problems with scaling and with parameterization and with dependency management. But the problem of how is my code performing is in fact a problem that's not only there, but could be even a little bigger, right? Because there's no machine to go inspect and log into and take a look at, right? It's you're there's this line from a very early history of computer science where someone said trying to monitor this kind of process was like trying to catch a mouse right when it's running back into its hole, right? And that, it's a little bit the feeling of trying to monitor serverless is you have this execution environment, it exists for as long as it's needed, and then it disappears, right? So how do you monitor that, and how do you get data on that?
Right. No, I've certainly been there myself with the first time I wrote a Lambda function that timed out, trying to understand in the logs what exactly is going on. And obviously the observability tools that New Relic has, I'm sure, help with that. I obviously, some folks haven't used New Relic before. Where do you suggest they get started? And is there anything going on at reInvent that New Relic is doing that maybe might help with that getting started?
Yeah, so of course, the first thing is come by the sponsor page, which you can get to from reInvent, and come and ask us for a demo, because frankly, just like any conference, we have some very smart people available to give you a demo and walk you through. Most of our stuff, frankly, is a lot more about observability as an art. Most of our talks are really about that than sort of direct product pitches. So come out and see my talk. I'm doing one on design and observability, and another one on open source observability. If not, that's either at reInvent or it's up on YouTube. I won't promise which it is, but it is really a great time to go check out New Relic as a tool, because a few weeks ago now we announced a free tier for life, which will give you some of that metric storage that really can be a big issue when you're trying to do observability on your own, for free for life. So that's a really good way if you're running a little startup or you're running a little agency and you want to get into observability. It's kind of a crazy thing. Observability is such a buzzword. There's so many great people making great observability tools, which is a bit like agile or test-driven development, saying well, everybody's really got to worry about this. If you want to be professional, you want to get good at this. And it's a funny thing, because no one would tell you, if you said, hey, I want to do test-driven development, no one would say, well, the first thing you've got to do is you've got to sign an $8,000 a month contract, right? But that is kind of where observability has been, is it's well, it's really an enterprise tool. Oh, well, maybe, you can negotiate down. We got the blue plan, and that'll just be $180 a month, right? Well, that's tough if you're out there looking for your first few web dev clients, or you've got $80 in sales a month and you're trying to launch your product. So having an observability free tier really can contribute a lot to checking it out. So I think a really basic way to get started is, take your application, host it on EC2 or any other kind of classic virtual machine, host it on your own laptop if you want. Whatever language, go and grab the New Relic agent and report up some data. And that's kind of the way to start to say, hey, this is application performance management. And instead of just seeing the classic information of here's how long your server takes to respond, which is sort of that's the CloudWatch stuff, that's the high level metric, to be able to click through and say, okay, this method in your Rails app is what's taking so long. That really changes how you're going to feel about your connection to your application. And, the great history, sorry, I'm talking at length. Maybe you wanted to cut me off there.
No, I wasn't going to cut you off at all. Actually, I was gonna defer to Stuti. I'm not sure if Stuti has gotten a chance to use New Relic at all, but I know you were looking through their product page and trying to understand the product a bit, and there were some features that were interesting to you. So, Stuti, if you have any questions to ask Nika.
Of course, thank you, Mo. Actually, I was very much interested when I was going through all of the product listing and solutions, and was really curious to know about applied intelligence, and that actually caught my attention. How your product has actually have applied intelligence to have that observability platform. I'm really curious to know about it.
Yeah, well, let me start with my own story here, because I love talking about applied intelligence in this context. So I've been a dev advocate at New Relic for about a year, but I actually got my start way back in the day in the tech industry at New Relic, working in tech support. And I did other stuff to do web dev in between, but when I was working in New Relic in tech support, you would get this question, especially as I got higher and you sort of get in the more solution architect thing where you're talking about, the general idea of how the product is used. And you'd have these conversations about alerts where someone would say, well, my service went down in this odd way and you didn't alert me. And we'd say, well, you can set up alerts for that. What's a good example? Someone was hitting a web server, a database server, and it was always returning an empty result. So their alert on response time was great. It was better than ever because it's way faster to return nothing, right? Empty packages go so fast, right? So they didn't get an alert for response time. They didn't get an alert for throughput. But the fact is that things were very, very wrong. And there would be this question that would come up in those conversations, which is, you have all of our performance information. Can't you just alert us when something looks wrong? Right? When you can see the little, line and it drops to here, right? Can't you just send us an alert for that? And the answer, of course, at the time was no. There's not some magic, machine mind that can tell you when something looks wrong, right? You have to set up an alert in advance. Well, that's what applied intelligence is trying to do what is generally referred to in the industry as anomaly detection, to say, hey, we're seeing something that doesn't look right. So for me, a classic would be, and Sheen Brasal of the Lego Group has talked about this, and it's a good point, is you might want to be wary when your billing with AWS has suddenly dropped by quite a bit. And that would be a really good candidate for this example where you're returning empty results, right? If you're not hitting your database and you're taking way less time to respond, your response time and your throughput are both going to look fine. But your billing will drop to almost nothing. And that would be a warning sign that something is very, very off. And sure, maybe you get that alert and you're like, well, that just means we're good at our jobs. We did make a change, and that totally makes sense. So, of course, there are ways to say, hey, this alert was not useful. This is our test environment. Hey, of course, it had high throughput because our Super Bowl ad just played. And, that's totally, you can give it feedback. But the big thing is that, seeing for the first time people having a Slack channel or something that just says, hey, here's this metric on this application, and it doesn't look right. And you can go check it out or not, but it may point to some concern. So, when I go to explain that, especially internally at New Relic, I'm like, look, this is a feature that people have wanted for 6 years. So now we finally have it. It's sort of like the flying car. It's like we could all sort of imagine it as being the next step of observability and metrics, and now it's the future is here.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, it's cool. What? Go ahead.
No, shoot.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask, like, what other features? I mean, obviously, the applied intelligence. I got a chance to play around with New Relic query language, which I thought was. I usually have an apprehension when using like languages that are developed, but I thought it was actually fairly intuitive to use. Yeah, it was actually super simple. I really like the autofill where there was a drop down that was like, is this what you want to search essentially? Yeah. What other things do you think people should play around with when getting started with New Relic?
So I think a really good thing to play around. I mean, of course, I think you should get started with serverless, of course, because I think serverless observability is the future. But I think that it's really worthwhile to think about having a single dashboard that collects a large number of pieces of data from a large number of points. So, that's something that's available with tons of tools. It's just the breadth that you're able to draw from with New Relic. You can go all the way from importing X-ray traces and logs from AWS up to very high-level metrics that cover, your self-hosted server and other components. TechTop was asking about, does New Relic work on self-hosted web apps? And yes, absolutely. That's where we got our start. But being able to look all the way from like front-end performance of your JavaScript to the memory that's available in your database server, right? And maybe those are closely connected in your patterns, so you're able to pull those into a single dashboard. Like, that's really nice. That can be a really powerful experience. There's a tiny thing that I feel like is so significant, which is the ability to group your metrics for your Lambda functions into a single dashboard called a workload. And that it feels so small, but once you really start doing serverless at scale, it can be so comforting to be like, yes, these two Lambda functions that do similar things can now just be connected together. Huge relief, because it lets you just look quickly at what the status of your service is overall. And then rather than having to change tabs and grab an ARN and go search for it, you can just click through and say like, okay, now I want to see in detail what's going on with this one. That's big. That matters quite a bit. I'm not a Kubernetes expert, but getting a similar sense for your Kubernetes cluster can be pretty major. Being able to see like which pods and which nodes are being affected, like that really helps.
Yeah. So we talked a bit about this earlier, but have there been any announcements during this reInvent that have like caught your attention that you're interested about? And then beyond just you, do you think there have been any announcements that New Relic is excited about more broadly?
Well, we're certainly interested in the container support for serverless. That's pretty big. The tooling around serverless has always been the kind of open question. I don't mean to be a broken record about serverless, but it is the future. I don't know what to tell you. But so that's interesting. And of course, we're looking always at how we can support that. Right in the run-up to reInvent, there were some announcements around serverless with this thing called extensions and the logs API that make our job in monitoring so much easier, and we're able to give even better, more in-depth data. And so that was really nice. Millisecond billing really matters. It really matters, and you're going to see some high-performance Lambda stuff. And it's so funny. Like a week before reInvent, I saw a like really well retweeted joke about like, hey, it doesn't matter. You shouldn't use Go for serverless because it doesn't matter that you're answering in 2 milliseconds because you're still getting a bill for 100 milliseconds anay. I was like,
now it does.
All right. Well, guess this is a real trenchant thing to say for another week.
So I know you have other things going on as well. Obviously, I think you have a stream after this. Do you want to tell everyone about what that is?
Yeah, let me drop a link in the channel here, but I'll find it in in our Twitch history. Here we go. If you are like a pro gamer fan and you want to come see Ammunition give you some Minecraft tips, we're doing a little meetup just for the people of reInvent. We can come and watch stream, ask your questions, and get live answers. It's going to be pretty fun. This was just kind of my idea. I just thought it would be a nice thing to do for people because we couldn't have parties and I couldn't, I can't buy you drinks, I can't buy you pizza, but I can, if this is somebody you think is cool, then you can come check them out. So I really like watching Ann streams. It's a very nice, I like the low key gamer energy. I'm not so much the I don't need to hear your high-pitched voices or you're yelling all the time. Like somebody's just, just kind of got a chill vibe. Seems nice. So we're doing that. Next week, we'll be doing another reInvent after party next Thursday. And hopefully we'll have some AWS heroes show up. That's on my Twitch channel, which is linked, or you can just click my username as I'm in the chat here. So yeah, those have been pretty fun. What else are we doing? Yeah, come by the booth. We have a whole bunch of stuff scheduled. A favorite of mine is I want to talk about how design affects observability. So how basically your the visual experience of your dashboards, your logging tools, what have you, really affect how quickly you can solve problems. That's been a really fun talk, and I'm gonna that's just like a 9-minute little nerd talk right now, but I'm gonna expand it out for later this year.
Yeah. I dropped a video link, a YouTube video link in the chat.
Thank you so much.
Has a bit more about what New Relic is doing at reInvent. Is there anything that we missed? I know you all have a booth. They can come by and see demos. Anything at all?
It is going to be kind of fun. We're having the CEO come in and try and actually build some stuff on our platform. I know we're doing that again next week. I think the link is up from our sponsor page. That's been kind of fun. Yeah. And it was fun giving my talk. It was really nice to be able to give a talk on observability planning for monolithic code. Like it was really neat to see the response and see sort of people's reaction to it.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves here, but do you think future reInvents you're gonna keep doing talks and keep doing hopefully maybe a keynote at some point?
Only if you make me hero. Only if you make me hero next year. I'm not.
I'll see what I can do.
A demon spoke out of my mouth. You know what it was? This year I was like, I didn't get made hero this year because, and it totally made sense. I was working with somebody else, and I really wanted Farrah Campbell to get made hero the year that we were working together. I was like, no worries. Hey, the reInvent so the free flight doesn't even matter to me. And then everyone starts being like, oh, just got an Oculus in the mail. I'm like, it's cool. It's cool. It's cool. It's cool. Erica Windish got one. It's like, yeah, you can't talk. I'm floating in a neon daydream. I'm like, yeah, no, it's cool. It's cool.
Everyone watching now is gonna want to be a hero too. I didn't know people got Oculuses.
I will say, if the program seems cool, if you're seeing other people talk about the cool perks or the cool information they're getting, if you're watching this, check out the AWS Community Builders. It's a really, really neat community. Heroes is very much like these are kind of the top people in the industry. These are the people to watch. It makes life very easy for me as I try to build community events because it's like, hey, if someone's an AWS hero, you know that they're going to have interesting views and interesting take on stuff. No disagreement. The community builders is just more, these are people who talk about it, who share stuff out, who give great information. And you can follow us on dev.to as well. I'll grab that link and drop it in the chat in just a sec. But if you go Google, AWS community builders, that's a great group. And so if you're interested in participating in the community, go take a look. There'll be, I'm sure, applications again open next year. And yeah, it's really worthwhile participating in that. It's also, you get to hear about everything 2 weeks ahead of time, so you can have all your blog posts drafted, which is pretty nice.
Cool. So We're running out of time here. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to tell everyone where they can find you on the internet. I know you mentioned Twitch, and obviously we have @serverlessmom here on Twitter, but where else are you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm serverless mom everywhere. I'm serverless-mom on GitHub. That's the only difference. But yeah, otherwise, I'm pretty bought into serverless stuff. So yeah, come check me out on Twitch. We'll usually be building some nonsense on serverless. I built my Minecraft server on Lightstep. I didn't try to build a serverless Minecraft server because I think that's a bad idea. Yeah, I'm going to say this, and then next week, Nader's going to be like, yeah, I built a serverless Minecraft server just to make me look foolish, but yeah, otherwise.
Cool. All right. Well, it is tradition here on the show that we end up with a sign off, and I've written them down so I won't forget them. It used to be tradition that we end with a sign off that I always forget the third one, but you have an option, just like you had last time, of happy trails, giddy up, or y'all come back now.
It's definitely y'all come back now.
Y'all come back now. What about you, Stu?
Come back now. That's my favorite too.
Y'all come back now. Yeah. All right. It's been a pleasure, everyone. Hope to see y'all soon. Keep us posted on your reInvent experiences. Obviously, you have me on Twitter. You have Nika on Twitter. You have Stuti on LinkedIn. And yeah, adios.
Thanks again.
Cheers.